Hi, how's it going again? This is Chris. Right, arms done, robot's done. The only thing left to do is the weapon for the actual modelling part. And then we get to kind of tidy up the rig a little bit and make it work. Now, to explain, I'm going to right click and unhide all. Okay, now this, we do is, let's clean up this load over here, is a weapon. Okay, this is a railgun that I created a while ago and never really got around to using. Now you're going to go, oh, and you're going to be slapping your head and stuff, right? But now, however, let me just show you something. So, if I go over here into my development folders, on another one, because this is your appendix A. You're like, appendix? And I'm like, yes, appendix. This tutorial contains a large appendix. And by large I mean like 2 gigs of appendix file, right? So, in the appendix you're going to find a tutorial some 11 parts long. And it comes in something like 2 gigs in size. It's enormous, right? Now, this is a tutorial on making a railgun. Now, all you've got to do is go to the appendix and start watching it, okay? And it'll show you exactly what it is you need to do. Now, bear in mind that this was originally made for a different piece. However, a different robot. However, I really liked this railgun. It's a good design. I always thought it was a good design, and it seems a shame, really, not to be using it with the piece that we have. So, what we have is, you'll probably notice this yourself, you have your asset, which is your gun, okay? And what I want you to do is take your asset, which is your gun, here, and I'm just going to open up my original file. Oh, that's the save button, not the not the one I want. Now, before I do that, I also want to ensure that this is a group, which it is at the moment. If I ungroup this, okay, so ungroup, you'll see it's actually made out of a hideously large amount of small pieces. Okay, and obviously, as you're going to follow the tutorial and not cheat, by going straight off to Appendix 1, building the weapon, I'm watching you by the way, you will have this weapon here. Now, I gave this some considerable thought. And the thing is that as I was basically going to be making this, and as this never really kind of came out as a physical DVD set, I thought, well, I'll include it, and that way I can focus on attaching it to the robot. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to open the last thing we worked on. Okay, because we're going to have to do a little bit of reinforcement to make it all work anyway. There we go. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to import the weapon in. So I'm just going to go over here to import, and I'm going to merge objects from external 3D files into this scene. I'm going to go down to my robot weapon. Just do that. Okay, and there's only one group in it, so I'll click OK. And it'll just import all the objects. Now, first thing you're going to notice is the scale's a little bit off. It was made slightly bigger than it needed to be, but don't worry, we can work on that. But what I need to do first is I need to take the arm, right, and I need to take this part, and I think I should probably keep my tools as well. And then I'm going to hide unselected. Okay, and that way they're not going to be in the way. Now, I'm going to have to pose this arm, and now is as good a time as any. So, I want this basically pointing straight down. So, I'm going to get this just here, and I'm going to give it an angle. Now remember, we've got it all linked together anyway. So I'm going to give it an angle of about 50 degrees. Which means that I can give this an angle of about 40 degrees, and suddenly we're at ground level, and then I can spin this around 90 degrees. Okay, power of angle snap. Now, if I get my weapon, here it is, okay, and go into my viewport here, I just need to change the angle to 90 degrees, like that, and flip it over, because my view is it should be upside down. Now the first time when I started building this, the actual plan was that there were going to be two of them, right? Now there will be two of them because it's got two arms. What I mean by that is, originally with this there was going to be like one on top of the other like that, and it creates this devastating shape. So you know what, I think that works, and I'm going to use that instead. So now I'll take this one and I'm going to ungroup it. So ungroup, then I'm going to take this one and ungroup that too, and then I'm going to grab all the parts that made this again and group it. Okay, and I'm going to call this railgun, and it's railgun 01. Okay, now as I can see there, some parts of the railgun don't quite fit, so I'm going to have to work on these parts at the back. So I'll just ungroup them again, and I can't really just move parts and hope they're going to work. What I'm going to have to do is grab bits like this and stick an FFD perhaps on them, maybe a 4x4. I think a 4x4 is more likely to work, and just click in there. And try not to deform the actual shape too much. You can see it's kind of deforming at the bottom there, which I don't really want. So okay, rather than having that deform, it's going to be a nuisance trying to get this to stretch in the right way, unfortunately. Let's see, I'll see if I can just move the last three. There we go. Oop, wrong button. Like that. Yeah, that's a bit better. Just make sure they're on top of each other like so, and they are. Okay, and then do that. Right click, convert to poly. And as you can see, we haven't lost too much of the important shape. Now there are various things you can go in and correct on this if you want to later. However, that is your call. As far as I'm concerned, you see, this thing here looks fierce. Now, attach all that together again and give it a group name. So we're calling it group, and we're calling it railgun 001 at the moment, like that, and then I'm going to turn it over. Okay, that's looking good. Now, what I want to do is kind of assign a piece that's going to control all this soon. But before I do, I really want to attach all this stuff together, because I don't like having too many small parts. This doesn't have any moving parts really, you know. Projectiles will shoot out the end and we might have some steam come out, but that's about it. So right click, and I'm going to go to group, sorry, not right click, and ungroup it again. And then over here where this is, I need to start attaching every single piece of this together, which will take me a minute or two. So before I do any of that, the most important thing to do is reset its X form. There we go. With that done, I can right click, convert to editable polygon, like that, and now I can start adding the bits together. So attaching stuff, and I'm going to hit F4, which will give me just a mass of polygons. It's a very high detailed weapon piece I made here, and this is why I gave it some serious consideration as to whether to use this or build a new one, which would have pretty much looked exactly the same, to be honest. And when it came down to it, I thought, well, not using it I think would have been silly. You know, there's a whole lot of stuff here. Just give autosave its stuff to do. And I know I sound like I'm being apologetic in doing this, and I am usually. I'd have made a separate minigun, not minigun, a separate one of these railguns for the project directly, but when you've already got one anyway, it kind of, I don't know, it just seems redundant. Anyway, you get the idea. There we go. So, getting in close. And there's a lot of bits to attach, but it's just basically a click and wait kind of job, really. You can see all the parts that aren't added. We'll certainly see them if we start moving stuff around. These grills need adding. That needs adding. Lots of bits to add in. However, they're all important, and it means that if they're added, they're not going to get left behind when we move the model around, because if they do, it'll look silly. And I don't want to have things all grouped up if I don't need to. Okay, there's some more tubes down here. Remember, everything's symmetrical, so what I could have done, to be honest, if I even had like a quarter of an ounce of common sense in my head, which I quite obviously do not, is just done one and then duplicated it. But obviously I don't. I don't even have a millimetre of sense in my head. So that means I've got to go and do it all manually. I think this is why I didn't do it before, actually. I remember vaguely looking at it and going, should I attach it all together? And then thinking, no. And now I'm thinking, oh man, I wish past Cris hadn't been so lazy when he made this magnificent looking railgun. It would be a nightmare to turn normal mappers to something, to be honest, wouldn't it? Now this side. So once we've done the basic preparation of this model, then I'm going to end the part, do some scaling to get it to the right kind of size for what we need, and then I'm going to do arm strengthening and build the parts that kind of the gun's going to attach to, obviously, whilst randomly clicking on this to make it look like I know what I'm doing at the same time. The problem with doing this many attaches is it builds a very, very heavy model after a while, and it takes a while to attach things to, as you probably will know. However, once it's done, it's done. This was actually included in the robot I made for, kind of as a tribute to my old friend Rob, because I started making it before he died, and at the time I built the robot set, it just had big hands, and the idea was that like I gave it this gun that it was able to carry, but it never really worked in that context particularly well, in my opinion. So I think being able to do it this way instead is probably a lot better. Let's let it catch up. As I've always said, it's a shame that there's no group marquee bloody stuff we can use with this, but there you go. Getting nice and close. We're nearly there. I believe I modelled this actually before Open Subdiv came out as well, which is a shame because I could have just stuck Open Subdiv on and left it low polygon. But you know. Also, this was a time I was going through a phase where I quite like doing kind of bridge polygons to give effects of detail. You'll understand if you watch Appendix 1, which you no doubt have and have built your own weapon for. And the temptation not to stick a model file in just to force you to do that is quite high, but you know I'm not going to. Of course I'm going to stick the model file in. An animal. So just put all these bits together. Bet you didn't think, like, you know, 15 minutes in, well, we've got the finished high detail railgun. Appendix 1, don't forget it. Right, let's have a look at this. I'm just going to go around the model, just look for bits that haven't been attached yet. And they tend to stand out pretty well, as you can see. Also make sure there's no inside out parts because they drive me crazy. Doesn't look like there is. Alright, we have a weapon. Right click out to stop the attaching process and hit F4. Okay, now what I say it's going to do its funky thing. And I am going to have to work out where the mount goes for this, which means working out roughly the middle area of gravity based on the artificial weight of this. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Nearly finished saving. It's a much bigger file than we're used to. Okay. Now, that's the arm there, so I'm going to go to my front viewport and take this gigantic spaceship alike I've got here. Put it approximately there. Now, attaching that would be hilarious in the way it is at the moment. I'm just going to get rid of those. Attaching this would be hilarious, however, sadly it would also make this into kind of a high school animate project and it would look terrible. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to look at the disparity between these two sides for a start. Come on you, click out. Right, so what I'm going to have to do is move this entire piece here down. So I'm just going to marquee select everything on this side and just move it down a couple of mils. This is going to basically force Max to its knees, so I suggest that you align them first yourself, because this is a lot of polygons to be moving. Yeah, hilariously, I paused it for a second because Max had paused and I was like trying to move it down, and then it moved down. So move it before you attach all your stuff together or you're going to have the same problem as I did. Right, left viewport, just want to get this aligned as well. And I'm just looking at roughly where I think the centre pivot's going to be, and it's going to be about there. Just so I've got this coming down over this. And for that to work, I'm going to have to affect my pivot only. I'm going to move my pivot over to here as well. I'll move it more accurately soon, but for the moment that's where it's going to be. Okay, now back into perspective, and what I need to do is basically scale this fella down. So at the minute it's far too big, and that looks like a good size for it. See how the heat sinks are fitting nicely in between there, like that. Okay, so now what I'm going to have to do is basically build an attachment system that attaches this onto that, and we can make sure that it's kind of fitting together nicely as well if I just unhide all. Now you'll see that this slots nicely, or intersects nicely into that piece there. Don't worry about that, okay? We just want to make sure that the weapon's the right size for the armour. We want it big, but not so big that it's going to be like retarded size. So at the minute it's quite big. We could possibly scale it up a little bit more if you wanted to, and make it like that big. Just remember, obviously at that size you're kind of giving a lot of weight to this arm, and you're going to have to really consider heavily about that. I think I'm going to go with it though, because I quite like the oversized look of this thing, because it's just ridiculously big. Okay, so in order for that to work then, I'm going to get that and that and unhide. Sorry, hide unselected. And in the next part I'm going to show you how we kind of attach them all together. So until then, bye bye for now.